Was the transatlantic slave trade the biggest crime against humanity? Let's talk about it. So the UN on March 24, 2026 passed a resolution that declared the transatlantic slave trade being the gravest crime against humanity. It was 123 countries that voted yes, 52 countries that abstained, and 3 of them said hell to the Nile. It was the US, Israel, and Argentina. Now let's sit with that and process it. What's really going on here? Because on the surface, it looks like an easy decision to make. Some would even say a finger roll, but when you start to see the pathology and erasure at work, you start to see they pissing on our legs and telling us it's raining. It's always certain groups to get to decide which history counts, which history gets erased, and it's always people of a European descent get to decide which history is and which history ain't. How funny is that? But before I get into the specificity of the vote, let's sit with the claim, the gravest crime against humanity, because some of y'all might not know what that actually means. The transatlantic slave trade lasted for 400 years when there was 12 to 15 million Africans that was forcibly taken, kidnapped, chained. And it wasn't just violence. It was the first time an entire system of law, economics, and theology was built on the complete dehumanization of a people, where everybody in the world bought that the African got onto the boat as African, got off as black, got off as slave. And the entire world bought into a people not even having a culture, not having a language, not even having land they tied to. The transatlantic slave trade is the first time in history we see that your state of being a property, your state of being captivity, is something that's inherited, something that's brought on to your kids and your kids' kids. That's the reason why it's one of the gravest crimes against humanity. It's an idea that's built around the concept of people being perpetual property, 3/5 of human, chattel slavery, a commodity. And the system didn't end, it transformed, it was remixed and it was reshaped. It funded the Industrial Revolution, built the banks, the universities, all the ways the empires has been able to expand and fold has been based off of the captivity of black people. As a matter of fact, there is no American economy big into the global sphere without King Cotton, without the way they was able to produce free labor on the backs of my ancestors. That's the reason why it's the gravest crime in humanity. It's literally birthed some of the biggest empires in it. Now that historical context brings us back to the vote. The resolution came from Caribbean and African nations because for them, this is about accountability and recognition and responsibility. It's about closing a wound that never really even healed. But the United States, the evil United States, they had to push back. They said they do not recognize the legal rights reparations for historical wrongs, for they were not illegal under the international law at that time. And even though we can acknowledge that slavery is bad now, we shouldn't have to pay for how it was seen being bad then, because back then it wasn't seen as bad. These folks said, this ain't Jordan, we ain't into that retro or retroactivity. They also oppose reparations. They said, we ain't paying you Negroes, get over it. When we start talking about Argentina and Israel, the other two countries that say hell no, it gets a little complex. It starts to get the little layer. First, Argentina was at the center of the contraband, human trafficking, slave trade of the 17th century. But they also abolished slavery early before America. The Freedom of Wounds was in 1833 that gave full abolition in this country by 1853. So Argentina is one of those history that has both a slave society and an early abolitionist nation that kind of shows you the complexity of being the oppressed oppressor. And they also have the Zilwe Mitgal. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. It was a criminal organization that operated in Buenos Aires from the 1890s to the 1830s. This is where Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe who trafficked thousands of Jewish women. It was a dark chapter in its histories, and it's a silent story for both Argentina and Israel, and both of them shared. So when you see two countries vote no alongside the America, you gotta ask yourself, what's going on? What's going on? What are they really saying no to? When your own country has been both the victim and perpetuator, you don't want to open up a door that might swing back on you and make it where you got to take accountability of some shit you're doing right now unapologetically, huh? So to the people in the back, when it comes to the logic of the black body being seen as property, we know that didn't stop in 1865. We also know it's a bunch of countries that's still indebted to the way they still see the body as being property. And to this day, them folks love talking about the Democratic Plantation, showing you that after 65, it didn't stop with the plantation. It turned into sharecropping, convict leasing, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, the war on drugs, all that. That's why Caribbean and African countries push this resolution, because they can't close a wound that you can't even name. They can't close a wound and heal that you don't even want to recognize. The U.S. says we can't apply today's laws retroactively, but they have no problem applying today's laws to maintain military power, to maintain global order, to be able to justify the slave trade. The law always says what is flexible and what is to be. They have no problem when it comes to recognizing the past, when it comes to seeing the illegitimate imaginary state in the Middle East. Education is elevation, man.